They called it a graveyard before the battle even began. A drifting mass of rusted hulls, mismatched armor plates, and flickering engine signatures. Humanity's so-called fleet hung in the void like a collection of forgotten relics. To the Imperial observers watching from orbit, it wasn't just outdated, it was embarrassing. And yet, 3 minutes before the first shot was fired, every Imperial predictive system returned the same impossible warning. Outcome uncertain. That had never happened before. Across the command deck of the Imperial flagship, silence fell like a blade. Officers stared at their displays, waiting for the system to correct itself. It always did. The Doctrine, the most advanced war prediction engine ever created, had never failed in 12,000 engagements. But the result didn't change. Uncertain, which, in the language of the Empire, meant danger. Far below, the human fleet remained motionless. If you're new here on HFY Global Tales, stay with this story, because what happened next didn't just win a battle. It broke an empire's understanding of war forever. Admiral Kareth of the Imperial Vanguard stood with his hands clasped behind his back, golden armor gleaming under the command lights. His species had conquered 1,000 systems using precision, order, and flawless execution. There was no such thing as chaos in Imperial warfare. Every variable was accounted for. Every enemy reduced to patterns. And humans were supposed to be the easiest pattern of all. Confirm classification, Kareth said calmly. A tactical officer adjusted the display, zooming in on the scattered formation ahead. Confirmed Admiral. Human vessels. Mixed classifications, though many do not match known ship designs. Structural integrity appears inconsistent. Inconsistent. Kareth repeated. The officer hesitated. Some vessels appear partially dismantled. Others show external modifications. Several are broadcasting false signatures, or no signatures at all. A ripple of quiet amusement passed through the bridge crew. Scrap. Exactly as expected. Run Doctrine analysis again, Kareth ordered. The central system pulsed, processing the battlefield in real time. Countless variables, ship positions, energy outputs, historical tactics, fed into the predictive core. The result appeared. Victory probability, 99.87%. That was more like it. The earlier anomaly was dismissed as interference, likely caused by the humans' outdated systems polluting sensor clarity. Kareth allowed himself a faint smile. Prepare engagement formation Delta 7, he said. Standard suppression. Minimal resource expenditure. Yes, Admiral. Across the void, the Imperial fleet shifted with perfect synchronicity. Sleek warships aligned into precise geometric formations, their shields overlapping in mathematically optimal patterns. Weapons powered up in sequence, each movement calculated to maximize efficiency and minimize risk. It was beautiful. It was unstoppable. And it was exactly what the humans were counting on. Inside the largest human vessel, a carrier that looked like it had been assembled from 5 different ships, Commander Elena Voss watched the Imperial formation lock into place. Her bridge was nothing like Kareth's. Panels flickered. Consoles were mismatched. Wires ran openly along the walls. Half the crew stood instead of sitting, manually adjusting systems that should have been automated centuries ago. It looked like chaos, but every movement had purpose. They're deploying Delta 7, one officer said. Voss nodded. Of course they are. Doctrine predicts a clean sweep, another added. Doctrine always does, Voss replied quietly. She leaned forward, eyes fixed on the enemy fleet. Signal all ships, she said. Phase 1 begins now. A beat of hesitation. Ma'am, Phase 1 isn't in any recognized combat structure. Voss smiled faintly. Exactly. The transmission went out. And that's when the human fleet did something no Imperial system could interpret. It broke apart. Ships peeled away from formation in every direction. Some accelerated forward at reckless speeds. Others drifted sideways. A few even powered down completely, going dark in the middle of open space. On the Imperial flagship, confusion rippled across the command deck. Admiral, an officer said, voice tight, enemy formation has dissolved. Kareth frowned. Recalculate. The Doctrine system updated instantly, then paused. For the first time in recorded history, it hesitated. Why is it delaying? Kareth demanded. Processing irregular behavior, the operator replied. Enemy actions do not match any known tactical framework. Kareth's expression hardened. Force prediction. The system complied. Victory probability, 94.12%. A drop. Small but impossible. They're disorganized, another officer insisted. This is panic. Kareth wanted to believe that, but something about the movements felt wrong. Not random, not entirely. Hold formation, he ordered. Do not advance until prediction stabilizes. Seconds passed. Then another update. Victory probability, 87.03%. The silence on the bridge deepened. What are they doing? Someone whispered. Because now it was clear. This wasn't panic. It was something else. Back in the human fleet, Commander Voss watched as her ships scattered across the battlefield, each following a different trajectory, a different timing, a different logic. Or rather, no shared logic at all. Imperial doctrine relies on pattern convergence, she said calmly. It predicts outcomes by assuming behavior will eventually align with known models. Her crew listened, hands steady despite the tension building around them. So what happens, she continued, when there is no model? No one answered. They didn't need to, because at that exact moment, the first Imperial targeting systems began to fail. Not physically, but logically. Enemy ships weren't where they were supposed to be. Their movements didn't resolve into attack vectors. Firing solutions contradicted each other. Predictive paths looped endlessly, without conclusion. The Doctrine wasn't just struggling, it was breaking. On Kareth's bridge, alarms began to sound, not from damage, but from uncertainty. Targeting solutions unstable. Multiple contradictions in trajectory prediction. Doctrine requesting manual override. That last one hit like a shockwave. Manual override. A concept the Empire had abandoned thousands of years ago. Kareth stared at the display, watching the human fleet move like a storm with no center, no pattern, no predictability. And for the first time in his career, he didn't know what would happen next. Out in the void, one of the smallest human ships, barely more than a reinforced hull with engines, suddenly surged forward, accelerating far beyond safe limits. Its path made no tactical sense. It wasn't targeting anything important. It wasn't even aligned with the rest of the fleet. And yet every Imperial sensor locked onto it, because the Doctrine couldn't ignore it. It had to account for every variable, even the meaningless ones. Especially the meaningless ones. Commander Voss watched the maneuver unfold, her voice barely above a whisper. Now let's see, she said, how you handle a war that doesn't make sense. Far across the battlefield, the first shot hadn't even been fired yet. And already, the Empire was losing. The Imperial War Doctrine was not just a strategy. It was certainty. For over 10,000 years, it had guided every fleet, every commander, every conquest. Entire civilizations had fallen not because the Empire was stronger, but because the outcome of their defeat had already been calculated long before the first shot was fired. War, to the Empire, was no longer chaos. It was mathematics. Every possible move, every reaction, every countermeasure was processed through the Doctrine's predictive core. A system so advanced it could simulate entire battles down to the smallest fluctuation in energy output or pilot hesitation. Nothing was left to chance. Nothing except this. On the flagship's central display, the battlefield flickered with contradiction. Human ships moved without alignment. Their trajectories intersected, diverged, overlapped, then broke apart again. Some accelerated toward empty space. Others slowed to a near halt for no apparent reason. One vessel was spinning slowly on its axis, venting heat like it was malfunctioning. But it wasn't malfunctioning. That was becoming painfully clear. Doctrine update, the operator announced, voice strained. Victory probability, 78.66%. The number hit the bridge like a physical force. Admiral Kareth didn't speak immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the display, but his mind was racing through something far more dangerous than enemy fire. Doubt. That number should not exist. The Empire didn't deal in uncertainty. It eliminated it. And yet, here it was, growing. Explain the deviation, Carrot said finally. The Doctrine specialist swallowed before responding. The system is encountering recursive prediction failures. Enemy behavior is not stabilizing into any known tactical pattern. Then expand the pattern library, Carrot snapped. It already has Admiral. It's pulling from all recorded engagements across 12 millennia. There is nothing that matches this. Another update. Victory probability, 71.02%. A murmur spread across the bridge, quickly suppressed, but not fast enough. Carrot heard it. Fear. That, more than anything, angered him. The Doctrine does not fail, he said coldly. It adapts. Continue analysis. Yes, Admiral. But even as the order was given, the truth was beginning to surface. The Doctrine wasn't adapting. It was chasing something it couldn't catch. Across the void, the Imperial fleet remained locked in its perfect formation, Delta 7, a configuration designed to counter 99.9% of known enemy strategies. Its overlapping shields, synchronized firing arcs, and layered defenses created a structure that no chaotic force could penetrate. At least, that was the assumption. Why aren't they attacking? One officer asked. It was the question no one wanted to say out loud. Because the humans had the initiative, and they weren't using it. They're waiting, another suggested. For what? No one had an answer. Careth's eyes narrowed. No, he said slowly. They're not waiting. He gestured toward the display, highlighting several human ships drifting far from the main cluster. They're positioning. But for what formation? The officer pressed. Careth didn't respond. Because there was no formation. That was the problem. Inside her command ship, Commander Elena Voss leaned back slightly, watching the Imperial fleet hold its ground. Still frozen, one of her crew reported. Of course they are, Voss said. They're waiting for us to make sense. A faint chuckle moved through the bridge. It wasn't arrogance. It was understanding. Status on Phase 2 assets, Voss asked. Ready, ma'am. All units are in place, though I still don't fully understand what some of them are doing. You don't need to, Voss replied. That's the point. She stood, stepping closer to the forward viewport. The Empire's fleet gleamed in the distance, perfect, ordered, unshakable. On the surface, they built their entire war philosophy on predictability, she said quietly. Every enemy they've ever faced eventually made sense to them. And us, someone asked. Voss smiled faintly. We're not here to make sense. She tapped a control panel. Begin Phase 2. The command rippled across the scattered human fleet. And once again, everything changed. Several ships that had been drifting aimlessly suddenly surged to life, their engines flaring in erratic bursts. Others altered course mid-vector, executing sharp turns that defied efficient movement. A handful of vessels even collided lightly with each other, bouncing apart like debris instead of maintaining formation discipline. On the Imperial flagship, alarms intensified. Multiple collision events detected. Enemy coordination is degrading further. Doctrine recalculating. The system paused again. Longer this time. Then, victory probability, 63.48%. That's impossible, an officer whispered. Careth's jaw tightened. Project forward engagement outcomes, he ordered. We can't, Admiral, the operator replied. The system cannot establish consistent future states. Every projection branches into contradiction. Then simplify the model. We've tried. It increases instability. Another pause. Another update. Victory probability, 58.11%. For the first time in centuries, an Imperial fleet stood on the edge of something it had forgotten how to face. The unknown. They're breaking the system, someone said, barely audible. Careth turned sharply. No, he said. The system is revealing the flaw. The bridge fell silent again. Explain, Admiral? The Doctrine specialist asked cautiously. Careth stepped forward, eyes locked on the chaotic movements of the human fleet. The Doctrine assumes that all conflict trends toward order, he said. That even the most irrational enemy will eventually behave in a way that can be predicted. He gestured toward the display. But what if that assumption is wrong? No one answered, because no one had ever needed to ask that question before. Out in the void, a cluster of human ships suddenly powered down completely, vanishing from active scans. At the same time, another group accelerated wildly, their paths intersecting in ways that suggested imminent collision, only to veer away at the last possible moment. It looked like madness, but it wasn't random. It was controlled unpredictability, and it was spreading. Doctrine update, the operator said again, voice almost mechanical now. Victory probability, 49.99%. That number broke something. Not in the system, in the crew. Because for the first time, the Empire was no longer winning. Kareth felt it, not as fear, but as a shift in reality. A line had been crossed. Admiral, the weapons officer said carefully, we are awaiting firing authorization. A simple request. One that should have been given minutes ago. Kareth hesitated. Not because he didn't want to attack, but because he didn't know what the attack would lead to. The Doctrine had always told him, and now it couldn't. Across the battlefield, Commander Voss watched the Imperial fleet remain frozen, its perfect formation now a cage of its own making. They're hesitating, one of her crew said. Yes, Voss replied softly. They've never had to think for themselves before. She folded her arms, eyes sharp. Signal all units. Prepare for Phase 3. A pause. Then, ma'am, Phase 3 is where we actually start fighting. Voss nodded. Exactly. Far across the void, the scattered human fleet began to shift again, this time subtly aligning, but not enough to form a recognizable pattern. Just enough to create something far more dangerous. Opportunity. And on the Imperial flagship, Admiral Kareth finally gave the order he had delayed for the first time in his career. Fire. The Empire's weapons ignited in perfect unison. Brilliant beams of energy lanced across the void, calculated with precision, optimized for maximum efficiency, and aimed at targets that no longer existed where they were predicted to be. The first volley missed. Not entirely, but enough. Enough to matter. Because, for the first time in 10,000 years, the Empire had fired first. And it had been wrong. The moment the first Imperial volley missed, something invisible shattered across the battlefield. Not armor, not shields. Certainty. For thousands of years, every opening strike fired by the Empire had been perfect, calculated down to the last decimal, predicted before it even happened. Their enemies didn't dodge. They failed to exist where the shots landed. But this time, the beams cut through empty space, grazing only fragments of drifting metal and the fading echoes of where human ships used to be. On the Imperial flagship, no one spoke. They didn't need to, because every officer understood what that meant. Recalculate impact efficiency, Admiral Kareth ordered, his voice controlled, but tighter than before. The system responded instantly. Strike accuracy, 61%. Another impossible number. Unacceptable, Kareth said. Yes, Admiral, the weapons officer replied, though there was no confidence behind the words. Because nothing about this situation was acceptable. Across the battlefield, the human fleet didn't regroup. They didn't counterattack in any recognizable formation. Instead, they continued doing exactly what they had been doing, breaking every rule. They didn't even react. One Imperial officer whispered. Kareth noticed it too. No defensive shift. No coordinated retaliation. No attempt to exploit the missed volley in a conventional way. It was as if the humans had expected it. Worse, as if they didn't care. Doctrine update, the operator said. A pause. Then, victory probability, 42.73%. The number dropped like a blade through the command deck. Kareth exhaled slowly. Begin adaptive targeting protocols, he ordered. Prioritize high-confidence vectors only. Yes, Admiral. The Imperial fleet adjusted, its perfect formation shifting with mathematical precision. Firing solutions narrowed. Target locks became more selective, focusing only on movements that could be predicted with higher certainty. Efficiency over coverage. Control over chaos. It was the logical response. And it was exactly what humanity had been waiting for. Inside her command ship, Commander Elena Voss watched the Imperial adjustments with calm focus. "They're tightening their models," one of her crew reported. "Of course they are," Voss said. "They're trying to reduce uncertainty. Isn't that smart?" Voss shook her head slightly. "It's necessary, but it's also a trap." She stepped closer to the tactical display, highlighting several Imperial firing lanes. "When they ignore low-confidence targets," she explained, "they stop seeing the whole battlefield." Her finger traced a line through the chaos. "They stop seeing us." A subtle shift moved through the human fleet. Not enough to form order, just enough to exploit the gaps. "Phase 3 begins now," Voss said. This time, the humans attacked, but not in any way the Empire could understand. A cluster of smaller ships surged forward, not toward strategic targets, but directly into the densest part of the Imperial firing grid. Their engines flared erratically, zigzagging through space with movements that defied efficient evasion. On the Imperial flagship, high-speed contacts approaching. Targeting solutions unstable, trajectory variance too high. Recommend ignoring low probability threat. Karatha's eyes narrowed. "Do not ignore any threat," he said sharply. But it was already happening. The Doctrine had categorized those ships as statistically insignificant. Their unpredictable paths made them inefficient targets. Resources allocated to tracking them would reduce overall optimization, so the system deprioritized them. Not completely, but enough. And that was all the humans needed. The first of those insignificant ships breached the outer firing envelope. Then the second. Then the third. "They're too close," an officer shouted. "Adjust targeting. We can't lock them consistently." The ships weren't dodging in any traditional sense. They were moving in ways that couldn't be predicted long enough to target. Not fast enough to outrun the weapons. Just unpredictable enough to slip through them. Karath felt something unfamiliar creeping into his thoughts. Not fear. Recognition. "These are not random maneuvers," he said quietly. "No, Admiral," the Doctrine specialist replied. "But they also aren't logical." Karatha's gaze hardened. "Then we are defining logic too narrowly." Before anyone could respond, the first human ship detonated, but not from enemy fire. It exploded on its own terms, releasing a massive burst of energy and debris directly inside the Imperial defensive grid. Shock waves rippled outward, distorting shield harmonics and scattering targeting signals. "What was that?" someone demanded. "Self-detonation," the tactical officer said, stunned, but intentionally triggered. Another ship followed, then another. Each explosion wasn't aimed at destroying ships. It was aimed at breaking the system. Sensors overloaded. Targeting grids scrambled. Shield frequencies fluctuated as the Doctrine struggled to recalculate under rapidly shifting conditions. And in that chaos, the rest of the human fleet moved. Ships that had been drifting aimlessly now surged into newly created gaps. Others powered up from silence, emerging from blind spots the Doctrine had deprioritized. Larger vessels rotated into firing positions that hadn't existed seconds earlier. It wasn't a formation. It was a cascade. Multiple new threats detected, the operator shouted. Where did they come from? They were always there, Karath said under his breath. He could see it now, the pattern behind the lack of pattern. The humans weren't fighting the Empire's fleet. They were fighting its expectations. Doctrine update, the operator said again, voice shaking slightly. The system hesitated, struggled. Then, victory probability, 31.09%. Silence. Not shock this time. Something heavier. Because now, the outcome wasn't just uncertain. It was slipping away. Admiral, the weapons officer said, we are losing targeting cohesion. Then, abandon predictive targeting. Karath snapped. The bridge froze. Sir, that would require manual control. I am aware. A long pause. Because what he was ordering wasn't just a tactical shift. It was heresy. The Empire did not fight manually. It did not rely on instinct. It did not embrace uncertainty. And yet, do it, Karath said. Slowly, reluctantly, the Imperial fleet began to disengage from the Doctrine's full control. Automated targeting systems loosened their grip. allowing individual crews to make real-time decisions. It was inefficient, messy, human, and for the first time since the battle began, the Empire started to hit something. A human ship erupted under concentrated fire, its patched armor failing under sustained impact. Another was clipped by a grazing beam, spinning out of control before stabilizing. Direct hits confirmed, an officer reported. A flicker of hope returned to the bridge. But Kareth didn't feel it, because he was watching something else. The humans weren't reacting to the losses. They weren't pulling back. They weren't even adjusting in a way that suggested concern. If anything, they were leaning into it. Inside her command ship, Voss watched the Imperial shift with quiet approval. "They've gone manual," a crew member said. "Yes," Voss replied. "That was faster than I expected." "Is that bad?" Voss shook her head. "No, it means they're learning." She looked back at the battlefield, eyes sharp. "But they're still thinking like us." A pause. Then, time to change the rules again. She activated another command. Phase 4. Across the battlefield, several of the largest human ships, those that had remained mostly passive until now, began to move. Slowly, deliberately, and directly toward the heart of the Imperial formation. New contacts advancing, the Imperial operator called out. Large vessels, low acceleration, but high mass signatures. Kareth focused on them. Unlike the smaller ships, these moved in straight lines. Predictable lines. For the first time in the battle, something made sense. Finally, one officer said, "A proper target." Kareth didn't respond, because something about it felt wrong. Too simple. Too clean. After everything he had just seen, humans didn't suddenly start making sense. "Run full analysis on those ships," he ordered. The Doctrine, partially disengaged, struggled to process the request. Then, preliminary result indicates high probability of direct assault. "Of course it does," Kareth muttered. But his instincts, new, unfamiliar instincts, told him something else. "This is not an attack," he said quietly. The bridge turned toward him. "Then what is it, Admiral?" Kareth stared at the advancing ships, their slow, deliberate approach cutting through the chaos like a contradiction. And then he understood. It's a distraction. Even as he said it, it was already too late. Because behind those massive, obvious targets, something far more dangerous had already slipped through. The moment Admiral Kareth said the word distraction, the battlefield shifted again. Not visibly at first. The massive human ships continued their slow, deliberate advance. Large, easy targets, cutting straight toward the Imperial formation like blunt instruments. Every instinct in Kareth's training told him to focus on them. They were the most immediate threat, the most logical threat, which was exactly why they weren't. "Redirect partial targeting to rear sectors," Kareth ordered sharply. A few officers hesitated. "Rear sectors, Admiral?" "There are no." "Do it." The command snapped through the bridge like a whip. Systems adjusted, sensors sweeping behind the Imperial formation, into regions that had been deemed low priority, low risk, nearly irrelevant just moments ago. And that's when they saw it. "Contacts," the operator shouted. Multiple vessels, minimal signatures, closing fast from behind. "How many?" Kareth demanded. "Unclear, sensor resolution is fluctuating." Of course it was, because those ships had never fully disappeared. They had simply been ignored. Across the battlefield, dozens of smaller human vessels, previously drifting, spinning, or powered down, had quietly repositioned themselves into the blind zones created by the Doctrine's earlier prioritization filters. Now, as Imperial focus shifted toward the obvious threat ahead, those forgotten pieces came alive. Engines ignited, weapons powered, vectors aligned, not in formation, but in convergence. They were setting this up from the beginning, Kareth said under his breath. And for the first time, there was something close to respect in his voice. "Rear shields adjusting," an officer called out. "Too slow," another replied. "We can't rebalance the grid in time." The Imperial formation, so perfect, so optimized, was never designed to be attacked from unpredictability. Its strength relied on knowing where the threat would be. And now, the threat was everywhere. Fire on rear contacts. Kareth ordered. Manual targeting crews reacted instantly, redirecting weapons toward the incoming human ships. Beams of energy lanced through space, striking several targets, destroying 2 outright, clipping another into a spiraling wreck. But for every ship hit, 3 more slipped through. They're not evading, an officer said, confused. They're accepting losses. Kareth's eyes narrowed. No, he said. They're spending them. The realization hit hard. Human ships weren't being wasted. They were being used. Each destroyed vessel forced the Imperial fleet to adjust, shifting shields, redirecting fire, recalculating positions. And every adjustment created new gaps, new weaknesses, new opportunities. It was like watching a structure collapse from the inside out, not because it was weak, but because it was being pulled in too many directions at once. Frontline status. Kareth barked. The officer at the forward display turned pale. The large vessels, they're still advancing. No change in trajectory. Impact time. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Under normal circumstances, that would be more than enough time to eliminate slow-moving targets of that size. But nothing about this battle was normal anymore. Divide fire, Kareth ordered. 50% to rear contacts, 50% to forward assault. Admiral, that will reduce overall efficiency. I am aware. The officer complied. And just like that, the Empire made its first true mistake of the battle. Because dividing fire meant dividing certainty. Across the battlefield, Commander Elena Voss watched the Imperial fleet fracture its focus. They took the bait, one of her crew said. Not entirely, Voss replied. But enough. She zoomed in on the tactical display, highlighting the shifting Imperial shield patterns. See that, she said. They're trying to maintain optimal coverage, but they can't. Every adjustment creates imbalance. Her finger traced the growing inconsistencies. They built a system that depends on perfection, she continued. Now we're forcing it to operate imperfectly. And that breaks it. Voss's expression hardened. No, she said. It exposes it. Another explosion lit up the void as a human ship detonated against the edge of an Imperial shield, destabilizing it just long enough for a second vessel to slip a kinetic payload through the flickering barrier. The impact wasn't catastrophic, but it didn't need to be. Localized shield failure, the Imperial operator shouted. Contain it. Kareth ordered. We're trying. Another alert cut through the chaos. Rear sector breach. Starboard flank destabilizing. Multiple shield harmonics out of sync. The perfect formation was unraveling. Not collapsing. Not yet. But cracking. Kareth gripped the edge of his command console, his mind racing faster than the systems around him. This wasn't brute force. It wasn't superior firepower. It was something far more dangerous. Understanding. They studied us, he said quietly. No one responded. They knew exactly how the Doctrine would react, he continued. Every move we've made, they predicted it. An officer shook his head. That's impossible. The Doctrine accounts for all known intelligence. Yes, Kareth interrupted. All known. The implication hung in the air. Humans weren't using known strategies. They were creating new ones in real time. Admiral, the forward observer called out. The large vessels, impact imminent. Kareth snapped his attention back to the front. The massive human ships were close now, too close. Their hulls, patched together from countless different designs, glowed under the strain of their engines. They made no attempt to evade, no attempt to defend. They just kept coming. Open fire, Kareth said. The Imperial fleet responded instantly. Concentrated beams slammed into the leading human vessel, tearing through its outer layers, stripping armor, igniting internal explosions. It should have stopped. It didn't. Why isn't it breaking apart? An officer demanded. Structural integrity is irregular, another replied. It's not failing the way it should. Of course it wasn't, because it wasn't built to. It was built to endure just long enough. Second volley. Kareth ordered. More firepower poured into the advancing ships. One finally split apart, its hull rupturing in a violent explosion that scattered debris across the battlefield. But even in destruction, it served a purpose. The debris field expanded rapidly, spreading directly into the Imperial firing lanes. Sensors flickered as targeting systems struggled to differentiate between active threats and inert fragments. Obstruction detected. Targeting clarity reduced by 37%. Recalibrating. Too slow. Because the remaining large ships reached their destination. Brace for impact, someone shouted. But they didn't collide with Imperial vessels. They stopped, right at the edge of the formation. And then, they opened. Sections of their hulls split apart, revealing something hidden deep within their patched exteriors. Not weapons, not fighters, something far worse. Energy spike detected, the operator yelled. Unknown systems activating. Karatha's eyes widened, shields to maximum. But it was already happening. The ships released a massive, synchronized burst, not of destructive energy, but of interference. A wave of chaotic signals, heat, electromagnetic distortion, and raw data flooded the surrounding space. It didn't destroy anything. It disrupted everything. Sensors went blind. Targeting systems collapsed into noise. Communication channels filled with static. And at the center of it all, the Doctrine tried to adapt. It tried to process. It tried to understand. And it failed. Completely. Doctrine offline, the operator screamed. That word echoed across the bridge like a death sentence. Offline. Not degraded. Not limited. Gone. For the first time in 10,000 years. The Empire was fighting a war without its mind. Karath stood frozen for half a second. Then, slowly, he straightened. All around him, chaos spread. Not the controlled chaos of human tactics, but something far more dangerous to the Empire. Unfamiliarity. Fear. Manual command, Karath said. No one moved. Manual command, he repeated, louder. The crew snapped into action, abandoning the systems they had relied on for generations. Orders were shouted. Controls were adjusted by hand. Decisions were made without prediction, without certainty. It was slower, messier, human. Across the battlefield, Commander Voss watched the interference wave ripple through the Imperial fleet. They've lost the Doctrine, one of her crew said, almost in disbelief. Voss nodded. Now the real battle begins. Because everything up until now had just been preparation. Out in the void, the scattered human fleet began to move again. Not randomly, not chaotically, but with something new, intent. And for the first time since the battle started, the Empire wasn't trying to predict humanity. It was trying to survive it. The moment the Doctrine went dark, the battlefield didn't just change. It unraveled. For the Imperial fleet, war had always been guided. Every movement validated. Every decision reinforced by certainty. Now, that invisible structure was gone, and what remained was something they had not faced in generations. Silence inside their systems. Noise everywhere else. Status reports. Admiral Karatha's voice cut through the rising confusion. Targeting grids are fragmented. Sensor data is unreliable, multiple false returns. Communications lagging across the fleet. Each report came faster than the last, overlapping, clashing, just like the battlefield itself. Karath forced himself to focus. Establish localized command clusters, he ordered. Each sector operates independently. Prioritize visual confirmation over predictive systems. Yes, Admiral. It was the right decision. It was also the Empire's greatest weakness. Because dividing command meant dividing awareness. And humanity thrived in fractured space. Across the void, the human fleet surged forward, not as a unified formation, but as a living storm. Ships moved in overlapping waves, some accelerating into attack runs, others drifting unpredictably between engagements. But now, there was something new beneath the chaos. Coordination. Not the rigid coordination the Empire relied on, but something fluid, adaptive, constantly shifting. They're tightening up, one Imperial officer noted. Karath saw it too. They're done confusing us, he said quietly. They're exploiting us. Inside her command vessel, Commander Elena Voss watched the Imperial fleet fragment into isolated sectors. Now they have to think locally, she said, which means they can't see the whole picture. A tactical officer nodded. They're reacting instead of predicting. Exactly, Voss replied. She turned to her crew, her voice steady but carrying weight. This is where we win. No dramatic speech. No celebration. Just certainty. Execute adaptive assault patterns, she ordered. Keep them off balance. No repeated tactics. Yes, ma'am. The command spread instantly. And once again, the human fleet did something the Empire could not replicate. It changed constantly. One group of ships attacked in tight coordination, focusing fire on a single Imperial vessel, overwhelming its shields through sheer persistence. Moments later, those same ships broke apart, scattering before retaliation could land. Elsewhere, a lone human cruiser charged directly into a cluster of Imperial ships, not firing, not evading, just forcing them to react. As their weapons locked onto it, smaller human vessels slipped in from the edges, striking exposed points before disappearing again. Every action contradicted the last. Every engagement rewrote its own rules. They're not following strategy, an Imperial officer said, frustration creeping into his voice. They are, Kareth replied. We just don't understand it. An explosion flared across the starboard sector as an Imperial destroyer lost shield cohesion and ruptured under sustained fire. Starboard cluster collapsing, the operator reported. Reinforce from central line. We can't, port side is under simultaneous attack. Kareth clenched his jaw. Every decision now had a cost. Every reinforcement created a vulnerability somewhere else. This was not how the Empire fought. This was not how war was supposed to work. But this was how humans fought. They're forcing us into trade-offs, Kareth realized. No perfect move, the Doctrine specialist added quietly. Only choices. And choices could be wrong. Across the battlefield, Voss tracked the Imperial responses in real time. They're starting to anticipate short-term patterns, one of her crew said. Good, Voss replied. Then we change again. She adjusted the tactical overlay, marking several human ships. Introduce asymmetry, she said. Let some engagements fail. The officer blinked. Fail intentionally? Yes. A brief pause. Then, understood. Moments later, a cluster of human ships engaged an Imperial cruiser and lost. Badly. 2 ships were destroyed outright. A third took heavy damage and drifted out of combat. On the Imperial flagship, we've repelled the attack, an officer said, relief breaking through. Enemy losses confirmed. For the first time since the Doctrine fell, something felt familiar. Victory. But Kareth didn't smile, because something about it felt wrong. Why that engagement? He asked aloud. No one answered. Why there? He pressed. Why commit to a losing fight in a non-critical sector? The bridge fell silent again, because the question didn't make sense. Until it did. Energy readings spiking nearby, the operator said suddenly. Kareth turned. Near the site of the failed human attack, space itself seemed to ripple. Residual interference from earlier detonations mixing with debris, radiation, and fluctuating shield frequencies. Secondary effect detected, the operator continued. Localized sensor blackout expanding. Kareth's eyes widened slightly. They created it, he said. They used the failed attack to generate cover. And through that cover, new contacts emerged. Human ships, previously hidden, burst from the interference zone, striking directly at an exposed Imperial flank. Ambush, someone shouted. Reorient defenses. Too late. The first wave hit hard, targeting shield emitters and communication relays rather than hulls. Systems flickered, coordination broke, and within seconds, the sector began to collapse. They're using losses as setup, the Doctrine specialist said, almost in awe. Every defeat feeds the next attack. Kareth nodded slowly. Yes. There it was again. Understanding. Not complete. Not comfortable. But growing. These are not random sacrifices, he said. They're investments. Across the battlefield, Voss watched the ambush unfold with calm precision. They're learning faster now, one of her crew noted. Yes, Voss said. And so are we. She looked out at the battlefield, her expression unreadable. Humanity doesn't win because we're stronger, she said. We win because we adapt faster than anyone else can understand. Another explosion lit up the void as an Imperial cruiser lost its propulsion and drifted helplessly, surrounded by shifting human attack vectors. But even now, the Empire was not collapsing. Not entirely. Kareth straightened, his voice cutting through the chaos once more. "Reform Central Command," he ordered. "Pull remaining forces into a defensive sphere. Tighten engagement range. Admiral, that will limit our firing arcs. It will also limit theirs." A pause. Then, "Yes, Admiral." The Imperial fleet began to contract, abandoning outer sectors and consolidating into a tighter, more defensible structure. It wasn't perfect, but it was stable, and stability was something. "They're pulling in," a human officer observed. Voss nodded. "They're trying to reduce variables. Will it work?" Voss didn't answer immediately. She studied the new formation, the way it compressed space, reduced angles, forced engagements into closer, more manageable ranges. Then she smiled slightly. "It'll help them survive longer," she said. "A beat. But it won't help them win." She activated another command. "Prepare Phase 5. Around her, the crew exchanged brief glances. Because by now, they understood what that meant. Each phase wasn't just escalation. It was evolution. Out in the void, the human fleet began to shift again, slowing, spacing out, adjusting in ways that didn't immediately signal attack. But something was different. The chaos was still there. The unpredictability remained. But now, there was pressure, building, invisible, unavoidable. On the Imperial flagship, Kareth felt it too. Not through sensors, not through data, but through instinct. For the first time in his life, he was learning to fight without certainty. And that's when he realized the most dangerous truth of all. The humans weren't just breaking the Empire's doctrine. They were replacing it. The Imperial fleet tightened into a defensive sphere, and for a brief moment, the chaos slowed. Not gone, not controlled, but contained. Ships aligned closer, overlapping shields reinforcing one another in dense layers. Weapons recalibrated for shorter ranges. Communication lines shortened, reducing delay and confusion. It was not the elegant perfection of doctrine-driven war, but it was something the Empire hadn't used in centuries. Resilience. Stabilization holding, the operator reported. Enemy pressure decreasing across outer vectors. On the bridge, a fragile sense of control began to return. Kareth stood still, watching the battlefield compress around them. The scattered madness of the human fleet now circled the Imperial sphere, like predators testing a shield. "They've stopped pushing," an officer said. "Regrouping." "Maybe," another added. "They've taken losses too." It sounded reasonable. It sounded logical. And that alone made Kareth uneasy. "Humans don't slow down without a reason," he said quietly. His eyes narrowed as he studied the outer edges of the battlefield. Find the reason. Across the void, the human fleet did something unusual. It paused. Ships that had been darting unpredictably now drifted into wider spacing. Attack patterns ceased. No immediate pressure. No aggressive probing. Just distance. Inside her command vessel, Commander Elena Voss watched the Imperial sphere settle into its defensive posture. "They're consolidating," one of her crew said. "Yes," Voss replied. "They've finally chosen survival over dominance." "Does that change things?" Voss tilted her head slightly, studying the formation. "It simplifies things." She tapped the display, highlighting multiple faint signals scattered across the battlefield, barely noticeable against the debris, radiation, and interference. "Status on embedded assets?" she asked. "All units are in position," the tactical officer replied. "Most remain undetected." "Of course they do," Voss said softly, "because they were never meant to be seen." She turned, her voice calm but precise. "Phase 5 begins." A ripple of acknowledgement moved through the ship, and far beyond, something woke up. At first, it wasn't obvious. No sudden attack, no dramatic shift, just small anomalies. "Admiral," the sensor operator said, frowning, "I'm detecting residual energy spikes." "From what source?" Kareth asked. "Unclear. They're scattered across debris fields, inactive ship husks, even empty space." Kareth's expression darkened. Define empty. The operator hesitated. There's nothing visible there, Admiral. Then something is hiding. Another alert chimed. Multiple low-power activations detected. Locations. Everywhere. That word landed heavily, because it wasn't an exaggeration. Across the battlefield, inside wreckage, beneath drifting hull fragments, embedded within what appeared to be scrap, tiny human devices began to activate. Dormant until now, ignored by the Doctrine, dismissed as noise. They planted them, Kareth realized. Not during the battle. Before it. Possibly long before. Energy output minimal. The operator continued. They don't appear to be weapons. Then what are they? Another officer asked. Kareth didn't answer. Because he was already starting to understand. Inside her ship, Voss watched the network come alive. Hundreds of small signals, each insignificant on its own, but together forming something vast. They built a battlefield we couldn't see, one crew member said. No, Voss corrected gently. We let them see it. She stepped forward. The Empire relies on what it can measure, she continued. So we gave them exactly that, and hid everything else in what they chose to ignore. The tactical display shifted, revealing the full scope of the hidden network. A web, invisible until now. And the Imperial fleet was sitting right in the center of it. Activate sequence, Voss said. Across the void, the devices triggered. Not explosively, not violently, but deliberately. A synchronized pulse rippled outward, subtle, precise, devastating in its own way. On the Imperial flagship, field distortion detected. Gravity fluctuations across multiple sectors. Magnetic interference rising. The defensive sphere trembled, not physically, but structurally. Shield harmonics, already strained from earlier engagements, began to desynchronize under the shifting environmental conditions. What is this? An officer demanded. They're altering the battlefield itself, another replied. And that was exactly what was happening. The hidden devices weren't attacking ships. They were rewriting the space around them. Localized gravity wells shifted trajectories. Magnetic distortions interfered with energy weapons. Sensor readings warped, bending reality just enough to make precision impossible. The Empire's greatest strength, control, was being eroded at its foundation. Compensate, Kareth ordered. We're trying, the operator said, but the distortions are inconsistent. They're changing faster than we can adjust. Of course they were, because the humans weren't maintaining a stable effect. They were constantly modifying it. Adaptive chaos. Shields losing coherence, another officer shouted. Firing solutions degraded by 52%. The defensive sphere, meant to simplify the battlefield, was becoming a trap. Every adjustment amplified another distortion. Every correction created a new imbalance. Kareth clenched his fists. They've turned space itself into a variable, he said. Yes, Admiral, the Doctrine specialist replied. And we can't predict variables that keep changing. Across the battlefield, the human fleet began to move again. But this time, it was different. Not wild, not scattered, purposeful. Ships advanced along paths shaped by the distortions. Routes that appeared inefficient or impossible from an Imperial perspective, but were perfectly aligned with the shifting conditions. They're using the field, an officer said in disbelief. They're navigating through it like they expected this. Because they did, Kareth replied. This wasn't improvisation. It was design. The entire battle, every phase, every sacrifice, every piece of drifting debris had been building toward this moment. New attack vectors incoming, the operator called out. Multiple angles, no clear pattern. The human fleet surged inward, slipping through the distorted space with uncanny precision. Imperial weapons fired in response, but beams bent, targets shifted, and calculations failed mid-execution. Shots that should have hit missed. Shots that should have missed struck harmless debris. Nothing aligned. Nothing behaved. This isn't a battlefield anymore, one officer whispered. It's a maze. Kareth stared at the display, his mind racing faster than ever. No doctrine, no prediction, no certainty, only instinct, only reaction, only survival. And yet, even here, the humans were one step ahead. "They're not attacking the fleet," Kareth said slowly. The bridge turned toward him. "They're attacking our ability to fight." The realization settled heavily over the room, because it meant something far worse than defeat. It meant irrelevance. Across the void, Voss watched the Imperial sphere struggle within the distorted field. "They're holding longer than expected," one of her crew noted. "Yes," Voss said. "They're adapting." A pause. Then, "So we evolve." She issued the next command: "Prepare final convergence markers." The words carried weight, because by now everyone understood what that meant. This wasn't just another phase. This was the beginning of the end. Out in the warped battlefield, human ships began to shift positions once more, not randomly, not chaotically, but in a way that hinted at something finally taking shape. Not a formation, not a pattern, something inevitable. On the Imperial flagship, Kareth felt it again, that creeping sense of something closing in. Not from one direction, from all of them. For the first time, the Empire wasn't losing because it was weaker. It was losing because it no longer understood the war it was fighting. And somewhere in that realization, Kareth made a decision, not as a commander of the Doctrine, but as something else, something new. "Prepare all remaining forces," he said quietly. "For what, Admiral?" an officer asked. Kareth didn't look away from the battlefield. "For a fight we were never trained to win." The moment Admiral Kareth abandoned the last remnants of Doctrine thinking, something changed inside the Imperial fleet. Not in their systems, in their minds. For generations, they had been guided, corrected, and protected by certainty. Every action validated before it was taken. Every outcome known before it unfolded. Now, there was nothing. No guiding system. No prediction. No safety. Only decisions. And for the first time in their history, those decisions were their own. "Listen carefully," Kareth said, his voice steady but carrying across every command channel in the fleet. "We are no longer fighting with the Doctrine." Silence followed. Not confusion. Shock. Because those words had never been spoken in war before. "You will act on what you see," he continued. "Not what you expect. You will trust your instincts, your crews, and your judgment." A pause. Then, "We fight like they do." Across the fleet, the order rippled outward. And something impossible happened. The Empire began to change. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Inside individual ships, commanders loosened rigid formations. Pilots adjusted trajectories mid-flight. Weapons officers fired based on real-time observation instead of calculated certainty. It was messy, inefficient, uncomfortable, but it worked. Direct hit confirmed. Enemy vessel destroyed. Adjusting vector. Manual correction successful. For the first time since the Doctrine collapsed, the Imperial fleet began to stabilize, not through perfection, but through adaptation. On the flagship, an officer turned to Kareth. "Admiral, we're holding." Kareth nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "but so are they." Across the battlefield, Commander Elena Voss observed the shift immediately. "They've crossed the line," one of her crew said. "They're thinking now." Voss didn't look surprised. She looked interested. "Good," she said softly. "Then this becomes real." Her eyes moved across the tactical display, tracking the subtle changes in Imperial behavior. "They're no longer predictable in the same way," the officer added. "No," Voss agreed, "but they're still limited." "How?" Voss zoomed in on several Imperial ships, highlighting their movements. "They're reacting," she said. "Faster, yes. Smarter, yes. But still reacting." She looked up. "We're still setting the pace." A brief silence settled over the bridge. Then, "Time to take it back." She issued the command. Phase 6. Out in the distorted battlefield, the human fleet shifted once more. But this time, the change was undeniable. For the first time since the battle began, something resembling structure emerged. Not rigid, not symmetrical, but intentional. Clusters of ships began to move in loose synchronization, forming temporary alignments that lasted just long enough to execute coordinated strikes before dissolving again. It wasn't a formation. It was a rhythm, and the Empire couldn't match it. Multiple coordinated attacks detected, the Imperial operator reported. They're grouping, then dispersing, then regrouping somewhere else. Kareth watched closely. Yes, he said. They're controlling timing now. An Imperial cruiser fired on a cluster of human ships, scoring hits, forcing them apart. But before the Empire could capitalize on it, another cluster formed elsewhere. Then another. Then another. Each one striking, fading, reappearing. They're everywhere, an officer muttered. No, Kareth corrected. They're exactly where they need to be. That was the difference. The Empire was spreading its attention. Humans were focusing theirs. A sudden explosion rocked the port side as a human strike group overwhelmed a shield node, collapsing it just long enough for follow-up attacks to penetrate. Port defenses compromised. Redirecting support. Too late, another officer shouted. The damage wasn't catastrophic, but it was precise, deliberate. Every strike now had purpose. Not chaos, not confusion, execution. They've evolved again, the Doctrine specialist said quietly. Kareth didn't respond, because he was already seeing it. This wasn't the same enemy from the beginning of the battle. This was something new, something shaped by everything that had happened so far. They're learning faster than we can adapt, one officer said. Kareth's gaze hardened. Then we stop adapting, he said. The bridge went still. Admiral? Kareth turned, his voice calm but decisive. We take control. How? Kareth pointed to the center of the distorted battlefield, the area where the interference was strongest, where human movement was most fluid. That's where they're strongest, he said, which means it's where they're most invested. A pause. Then realization spread. You want to push into it? An officer asked. Yes. Admiral, that's the most unstable region. Exactly. Kareth stepped forward. If we stay on the edges, we fight their war, he said. If we move into the center, we force them to fight ours. It was a risk, a massive one, but for the first time, it was a human kind of decision. Uncertain, bold, necessary. Signal all units, Kareth ordered. Advance into the distortion field. Full engagement. The command echoed across the fleet, and slowly, the Imperial sphere began to move. Not retreating, not holding, advancing. Across the battlefield. Voss saw it immediately. They're coming in, one of her crew said. Into the center. Voss watched the movement, her expression unreadable. Interesting, she said. They've decided to stop surviving and start fighting. Is that a problem? Voss shook her head. No, she said. It's exactly what we wanted. Because this was the final step. Prepare convergence, she ordered. Around her, the crew moved with quiet intensity, because now everything that had been built, the chaos, the distortions, the hidden network, the evolving tactics, was about to come together. Out in the void, the human fleet adjusted once more. But this time, there was no mistaking it. They were closing in, from every direction. Not randomly, not unpredictably, inevitably. On the Imperial flagship, Kareth felt it too. That pressure. That sense of something final approaching. But instead of fear, he felt clarity. For the first time in the battle, he understood the shape of what was happening. Not every detail, not every move, but the intent. They're trying to end this, he said. Yes, Admiral, an officer replied. Kareth nodded. Then we make sure it costs them. He looked out at the battlefield, no longer searching for certainty. Only opportunity. Prepare all weapons, he ordered. No reserves. Because whatever happened next would decide everything. And across the void, as both fleets surged toward the center of the storm, the war reached its breaking point. The moment both fleets surged into the heart of the distortion field, the battlefield ceased to exist as anyone had ever understood it. There were no clean lines, no clear fronts, no safe distance, only movement, collision, and fragments of decisions colliding faster than thought. Imperial warships plunged forward, their once perfect formation now fully abandoned. Engines burned unevenly as gravity distortions pulled at their mass, dragging trajectories off course. Weapons fired in bursts, some striking true, others bending wildly through warp space. But this time, They didn't hesitate. Close-range engagement, an Imperial officer shouted. Visual targeting only. Fire at will. And for the first time in the battle, the Empire looked dangerous again, not because it was precise, but because it was relentless. A human strike group darted in from the left, 3 ships moving in perfect rhythm, only to be met by a sudden, unpredicted counterattack. An Imperial cruiser pivoted manually, firing before its systems could fully calculate, catching one of the ships mid-maneuver. The vessel erupted. "Hit confirmed," the officer yelled. Kareth watched it without satisfaction, because for every success, 2 more threats emerged. "They're still faster," he said. "Not in speed," the Doctrine specialist replied. "In decisions." Across the battlefield, Commander Elena Voss stood steady as her fleet converged from every direction. "Maintain pressure," she said. "No fixed positions. Keep them reacting." Her voice remained calm, but her eyes moved constantly, tracking dozens of engagements at once. "They're adapting faster now," one of her crew warned. "Yes," Voss said. "They've finally accepted uncertainty." A pause. "Which means they're dangerous." On the tactical display, Imperial ships pushed deeper into the distortion field, disrupting several human attack clusters. Their willingness to act without prediction was creating friction, slowing the rhythm humanity had established. "They're breaking tempo," the officer added. Voss nodded slightly. "Then we changed the tempo." She issued a rapid sequence of commands. Across the battlefield, human ships altered their behavior again. But this time, it wasn't chaos. It wasn't fluid adaptation. It was synchronization. Clusters that had once formed and dissolved unpredictably now began aligning at precise intervals. Movements overlapped in cascading waves, each group feeding into the next with deliberate timing. It wasn't a formation. It was a chain reaction. Multiple converging vectors, an Imperial operator shouted. "They're coordinating across the entire field." Kareth saw it, not as a pattern, but as a sequence. "They're compressing the battlefield," he said. "Yes, Admiral," the specialist replied. "All engagements are being drawn inward, toward one point, the center." "Of course," Kareth muttered. "This was always the plan. Every phase, every sacrifice, every distortion, all leading here." "Prepare for full contact engagement," he ordered. "No withdrawal, no repositioning." The crew didn't question it, because there was nowhere left to go. The 2 forces collided fully. At close range, the war became brutal. Imperial ships, built for precision, now fought like brawlers, firing at point-blank range, ramming through debris, relying on armor and instinct instead of calculation. Human vessels weaved through the chaos, striking with calculated bursts, then vanishing into shifting blind spots. Explosions lit the void in rapid succession. A human frigate slammed into an Imperial destroyer, not to destroy it, but to lock it in place long enough for 3 other ships to strike its exposed flank. An Imperial cruiser, heavily damaged, rotated manually and unleashed a continuous beam that cut through 2 approaching human vessels, only to be overwhelmed seconds later by attacks from behind. There were no clean victories, only exchanges, cost for cost, move for move, and at the center of it all, the convergence tightened. "They're hurting us," an officer realized. "Yes," Kareth said, "but we're letting them." A beat. Then, no more. He stepped forward, his voice rising above the chaos. "All units, break convergence." The command rippled outward. Imperial ships began to scatter, breaking away from the inward pull, attempting to disrupt the human sequence. For a moment, it worked. The chain reaction faltered. Human clusters misaligned. The rhythm broke. "They're disrupting our timing," a human officer warned. Voss watched the shift carefully. "Good," she said softly. "Let them think that." Her hand hovered over the command interface. Because this was the final step. Execute convergence lock. Across the battlefield, something subtle changed. Not in movement, in position. Every human ship, no matter how scattered, no matter how damaged, adjusted slightly. Tiny corrections, barely noticeable, but all pointing toward the same invisible coordinates, the center. And suddenly, The Empire realized it hadn't broken the convergence. It had completed it. "Admiral," the operator whispered. Karatha's eyes widened as the tactical display updated. All vectors, all movements, all paths intersected. "We're at the focal point," the specialist said, voice shaking. Karath exhaled slowly. "Yes," he said, "and we never left it." This was never a trap that closed. It was a trap they had been inside from the beginning. Every push, every retreat, every adaptation had guided them here, to this exact position, at this exact moment, across the battlefield. Voss gave the final command. Now, the human fleet moved as one, not in formation, not in symmetry, but in perfect intent. Ships from every direction surged inward, not chaotically, not unpredictably, but with absolute clarity of purpose. Every weapon fired, every vector aligned, every action converged. On the Imperial flagship, all sectors under simultaneous attack, shields collapsing across multiple points. "We can't cover everything." Karath stood still, watching the storm close in. For the first time, there was nothing left to adapt to. No new tactic, no hidden phase, just the outcome of everything that had come before. "They didn't break the Doctrine," he said quietly. "They replaced it." Around him, the Imperial fleet fought with everything it had left: manual control, instinct, courage. But it wasn't enough. Because humanity wasn't just fighting the battle. They were controlling it, shaping it, ending it. A massive explosion tore through the outer edge of the Imperial formation as another cruiser fell, its destruction rippling through already weakened defenses. "Admiral, we're losing cohesion," an officer shouted. Karath nodded once. "I know," but his voice wasn't filled with fear. It was filled with something else: acceptance, respect, because now he understood not just what the humans had done, but why. They didn't need perfect ships. They didn't need perfect systems. They didn't even need perfect plans. They just needed one thing: the ability to change faster than anyone else. And that was something the Empire had never learned. The final wave hit, and the Imperial fleet began to break. The Imperial fleet didn't collapse all at once. It fractured, one ship at a time, one decision at a time, one realization at a time. At the center of the battlefield, where the convergence had sealed their fate, the once perfect war machine of the Empire fought with everything it had left: manual control, instinct, raw determination. But it wasn't enough, because this wasn't a battle they had been built to win. Starboard line gone, central relay destroyed, multiple ships losing propulsion. The reports came faster now, no longer controlled, no longer precise. Just fragments of a force unraveling under pressure it could no longer contain. Admiral Karath stood unmoving on the command deck, watching the end unfold in real time. Not with denial, not with panic, but with clarity. Around him, the Empire still fought. Ships fired until their weapons failed. Crews rerouted power manually. Pilots pushed damaged vessels beyond safe limits just to hold the line a few seconds longer. And for the first time in its long history, the Empire looked like humanity: messy, desperate, alive. But humanity had one advantage the Empire did not. They had chosen this kind of war. Across the battlefield, the human fleet didn't slow, didn't hesitate, didn't celebrate. They pressed forward with relentless, controlled force. Every movement aligned with the end they had been building toward since the first moment of confusion. Inside her command ship, Commander Elena Voss watched the final phase unfold. Remaining resistance pockets collapsing. One of her crew reported Imperial fleet integrity below 20%. Voss nodded slightly, her eyes still scanning the battlefield. "Maintain pressure," she said. "No gaps, no regrouping." There was no triumph in her voice, only completion. Because this wasn't about destroying the Empire. It was about proving something, and that proof had already been written into the battle itself. On the Imperial flagship, the lights flickered as another shockwave rippled through the hull. "Admiral, we've lost outer shielding. Emergency systems failing. We can't hold much longer." Karath listened, but his focus was no longer on survival. It was on understanding. They didn't overpower us, he said quietly. No one responded. They didn't outgun us or outnumber us. He looked at the shattered remains of the battlefield, at the human ships still moving with purpose, still adapting even now. They outthought us. The words settled heavily over the bridge, because they were true, and because they had never been spoken before. An officer stepped forward, voice strained. "Admiral, we can attempt a retreat. There's still a narrow corridor." "No," Kareth said. The officer froze. "No retreat," Kareth repeated. Not out of pride, not out of denial, but because he understood something now that went beyond this battle. "If we run," he said, "we survive, but we learn nothing." He turned to face his crew. "For 10,000 years, we believed war could be solved, perfected, predicted." His gaze hardened. "We were wrong." Silence filled the bridge, not fearful, reflective, because even now, at the edge of defeat, they were still learning. Across the void, human ships closed in on the last clusters of Imperial resistance. Precision strikes disabled weapons, engines, and communication arrays, ending the fight piece by piece rather than through reckless destruction. "They are controlling the damage," one Imperial officer said, confused. "They're not wiping us out." Kareth noticed it too, and for the first time since the battle began, he allowed himself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Of course they aren't," he said. "They want us to remember this." Inside her ship, Voss watched as the final Imperial formations broke apart, their resistance fading but not entirely extinguished. "Why not finish them completely?" one of her crew asked. Voss didn't answer immediately. Her eyes remained fixed on the battlefield, the drifting wreckage, the damaged ships, the survivors still fighting, still thinking. "Because this isn't the end," she said finally. "It's the beginning." A pause. Then, "They need to understand why they lost." Back on the Imperial flagship, alarms blared one last time as the ship's core systems began to fail. "Admiral, we've lost propulsion. Weapons offline. Life support holding barely." Kareth nodded once. "That's enough." He stepped forward, activating a fleet-wide channel. Every remaining Imperial ship, damaged, drifting, barely functional. "Receive the transmission." "This is Admiral Kareth," he said. His voice was steady, clear. "Stand down." Shock rippled across the surviving crews. "Admiral?" "Stand down," he repeated. One by one, Imperial ships powered down their weapons. Not because they were forced to, because they chose to. Across the battlefield, the human fleet slowed. Not retreating, not advancing, just stopping. The war was over. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, Commander Voss opened a channel. "Imperial Fleet," she said, her voice calm, measured, unmistakably human. "This is Commander Elena Voss of HFY Global Tales." She let the words settle. "You fought well." On the Imperial flagship, Kareth listened. "Not as an enemy, but as something else." "We didn't win because we're stronger," Voss continued. "We won because we don't believe war has rules." A pause. "Only opportunities." Kareth closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. "And we lost," he said quietly to his crew, "because we believed it did." The battlefield drifted in silence, wreckage and survivors suspended in the aftermath of something far greater than a single conflict. Because this battle had changed something fundamental, not just for the Empire, for the entire galaxy. Humanity had proven that unpredictability could be weaponized, that chaos could be controlled, that war was not a system to be solved, but a reality to be shaped. And as the damaged Imperial fleet prepared to withdraw, not in shame, but in understanding, one truth remained, echoing across every surviving mind. The next time humanity went to war, there would be no doctrine left to rely on, only adaptation, only instinct, only survival, and somewhere deep in the silence of space, that realization spread faster than any fleet ever could. If you made it to the end, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to HFY Global Tales, and share this story with someone who loves epic sci-fi battles. Because this wasn't just a story about a war. It was about the moment the galaxy learned. Never underestimate humanity.